Morning, this is Dennis Fuchs with the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District update. Today I'd like to talk to you about a couple different things. First thing I'd like to talk about is the roadsides for habitat. And I know a lot of you folks have already mowed and probably baled your road ditches, but for those of you that didn't, and for those of you that want to do something different next year, I'm going to read something here from the DNR and just give you some ideas of why leaving that vegetation along the roads as long as possible benefits our wildlife. All right, here we go. Delaying roadside mowing until August 1st benefits pheasants, songbirds, pollinators, and more, according to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. With a growing concern for pollinators, we all need to do our part to protect our wildlife flower habitat, said Kamita Nelson, a DNR prairie grassland coordinator. You know, and that's why we want to encourage landowners along Minnesota roads and highways to avoid mowing or otherwise disturb the roadside vegetation until after August 1st, or even until the fall, to provide flowers for bees and nesting cover for birds. Roadsides with native wildflowers are especially beneficial to native bees. Research has shown that the width of roadside and the proximity to traffic does not matter to bees. Minnesota beekeepers place a high value on roadside wildflowers. The loss of habitat is one of the critical causes of the decline of both wild bees and honeybees. Roadsides also provide more than 500,000 acres of nesting areas in the pheasant range of southern and western Minnesota. Roadside habitat is especially important in intensively row crop regions where there is little other grassland available. After a difficult winter and a wet spring, we are concerned about the pheasant nesting this year, said Scott Roanholt with the DNR. In spite of the weather, pheasant nesting is pretty much on a typical schedule. Most pheasant hens are currently sitting on nests and will hatch their broods in mid to late June. So right now we're looking at most of those chicks being out there running around. A nesting hen lays eggs at a rate of about 1 per day. Nests contain an average of 12 eggs. The incubation period is 23 days and starts after all the eggs have been laid. The hen will remain on the nest, leaving only briefly to feed. If the nest is destroyed, the hen will repeatedly nest until she is successful in hatching a clutch, although re-nesting clutches have fewer eggs. The peak hatch time for pheasants, about 60%, is the third week in June. But depending on the weather, there are still a lot of birds nesting in early July. Hens will make from 1 to 4 attempts at nesting during spring nesting season, but will only hatch 1 brood per year. That's pretty interesting. Chicks need to be at least 2 to 3 weeks old to have any chance of escape from mowers. By August 1st, the reproductive season is over for most pheasants, with the exception of a few late re-nesting attempts. In Minnesota, between 1/4 and 1/3 of pheasants are hatched in roadsides. Roadsides are also important habitat to teal, mallards, gray partridge, and many grassland songbirds, frogs, and turtles. The way roadsides are managed can influence the abundance of local wildlife and populations. Roadsides should also be protected from burning, crop tillage, grazing, and blanket spraying of herbicides. At sites where noxious weeds are a problem, it is recommended that landowners use spot mowing or spot spraying for treatments. So that was just a little information on road signs for habitat. And it's interesting that, the bees are not impacted by traffic. I occasionally will see a dead rooster or a hen or a chick alongside the road, but if you're out and about, you really don't see that many. And typically they hang in that nesting area, and that's where the bugs and the food is. That's where they want to hang out. So if that's something you can do to leave your roadsides unmowed until August 1st, that'd be great. If not, we understand you're trying to get some forage for your livestock too, but trying to delay that mowing as late as possible would be fantastic. Okay, now I want to talk about another article, changing gears here a little bit, and this is from Tom Booman. He writes an article in Precision Conservation, Effective Conservation, and he's got an article called Unintended Consequences. And I'm going to read this to you. I thought it was very good. And it's just, As we learn, as we move and get older and wiser, hopefully we get wiser, there's always things that we can do to improve what we're doing to the planet. So here we go. This is actually from Tom Booman. I never knew my grandpa, Booman. He died before I was born. My dad described Grandpa as progressive. In the 1940s, Grandpa decided it was too laborious to farm the curvy creek, so he straightened his half a mile of creek in Shelby County, Iowa. Back then, straightening creeks was a common practice. I am sure, given Grandpa's progressive nature, he was one of the first to straighten his section of creek. And they got a photo here of the creek, and it's very curvy. And you can see where he straightened it into a nice straight ditch. And goes on to say, of course, Grandpa didn't understand the chain reaction of events that he put into motion by straightening the Silver Creek. We now know that when we straighten a creek or river, we create a steeper grade in the channel. If we take out a half a mile of stream length by straightening, the grade of the stream is essentially doubled, meaning an increased water rate of flow. This increased velocity provides more energy to water, giving stream more erosive power. The increased erosive power leads to downcutting of the stream into the landscape. When these deeper stream banks get saturated, they cave in, causing the stream to get wider. As neighbors straighten their segment, the problem worsens, starting from that point and working upstream to the upper end of the watershed. A stream that was once 2 to 3 feet below the bank is now 12 feet below. A stream that once could be jumped across now has a span of 50 feet from top of the bank to top of the bank. And for 75 years, Silver Creek has been cutting deeper and wider. And I'm sure Silver Creek, I know, is not only a lot wider and deeper, but also a lot muddier, and has poor water quality and supports a fraction of wildlife that it used to. I don't blame Grandpa for straightening the Silver Creek. I'm sure he did what he thought was best for his farming operation. But I wonder if Grandpa had known about the chain reaction he was going to cause, would he do the same thing? I think he probably would have still straightened the creek, but I also think he would have taken preventive methods to mitigate some of the unintended consequences. Today, we are more knowledgeable. Hopefully, we don't have to repeat the mistakes of the past. If we're going to feed the world, rule number 1 must be look ahead and see how our operations created unintended consequences. No one sets out to destroy our soil resources, but we set out to aggressively protect our soil resources. That's a question. But do we set out to aggressively protect our soil resources? Hopefully, we will use the science to see how actions we take today govern what happens tomorrow. There are things we do know. Increased erosion leads to a reduction in organic matter, water holding capacity, cation exchange capacity, and ultimately a reduction in yield. That was from Tom Booman, an article he wrote for Precision Conservation. And I think that that's something that we need to keep in mind. There's a lot of things that we do to the landscape that can impact our resources. And I had a landowner contact me about not being able to get to his pasture ground. And he was asking if I paid my garbage man every month. And I said, yes, I do. And he said, well, he'd like to get paid, too, for taking everybody's garbage, which was excessive water. So he's got a point. You know, what we do in the upper part of the watershed, there's a lot of people trying to figure out how to get water off their fields quicker, especially when we get years like this. But there are downstream impacts, and we need to think about that. And maybe there's portions of your field when you look across the landscape, that maybe should be a restored wetland. If you got trouble farming it and you can't put any tile drain in it, maybe it would be an opportunity to do a wetland restoration. I just want to finish my radio show with a quote from Richard Cruze. He's from Iowa State University, and he goes on to say here, soil conservation and water quality can be improved, but to continue approaches that have been only marginally successful or not successful at all, and believing we will have a different outcome, borders on wishful thinking. I think with the storms we've seen these past several years, somewhere in the county has been getting blasted in May with massive storm events. And if we continue to allow these storm events, we really don't have any control over that, but we can modify what we have on the landscape. We can have more crop residue. We can have structural practices on the landscape, such as grass, waterways, water and sediment basins, and also cover crops. If we actually have something growing and anchored on the surface, that will help protect our soil. We need to do what we can. I don't think we're going to see any let up on the storm intensity anytime soon. So we need to modify what we're doing to improve and protect our soil productivity potential and water quality. It's a two-pronged. As we impact water quality, we're also sending the best topsoil, the stuff that creates the highest yielding corn, soybean, alfalfa crops out there. We cannot allow that. So this has been Dennis Fuchs with the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District Update. Have a great week.